There are many shooting games out there, and I have a strange obsession with them. In that way, I am always looking for innovative solutions to the problems inherent to shooting in video games. Shooting games address the needs of the player through the satisfaction of conflict. You shoot, and see the enemy fall, and you live to fight another day. I could go on to extremely deep levels here about why this need exists psychologically, but I just want to establish what shooting games do, and why they are important in the video game space. It has been a long time since the Battle Royale innovations near the end of the 2010s. The benefits this form factor took in the development of shooting games cannot be overstated. The movement from constant action to tension, the condensation of the actionable moment, and the displacement, the release of the winners and losers to loot or die, while knowing that your fight could be capitalized upon or remarked upon by other players, took the space surrounding a shooting encounter and expanded it. Suddenly, it was not just the skill of shooting that a player had to contend with, it was the act to shoot at all, or to run, or what to do with information that was not yet usable, but could be very soon. All of these innovations left close-quarters experiences in a tough spot. Suddenly, the live, die, repeat shooting of the past felt like masticating, constantly regurgitating the shooting experience until it felt meaningless. All of a sudden, a question arose. How do shooting games recover? Some have been regressive, like in the boomer shooter explosion that followed the 2016 Doom reboot. Here the arena shooter returned with even higher speeds, greater skill, greater fidelity. This is a rejection of the innovative model. For others, we have seen an evolution of the Battle Royale model with the extraction shooter. Games like Hunt Showdown and Escape from Tarkov attempt to lean more on the space in between the shooting situations, thus focusing more on the knowledge of these games rather than the skill of conflict resolution. Ready or Not has been a SWAT tactical shooter in development for years and reached 1.0 status on December 13th, 2023. The goal of the game is to bring order to the chaos, where you play as a SWAT team leader in the midst of what appears to be near societal collapse. As such, many of the situations you are pressed to resolve are heightened, far more lethal, more visceral. We perhaps therefore see a fatalistic or neo-noirish bent towards the context that the game presents, a small tribe pushing back against the tide of total debasement and anarchy. We cannot avoid the feeling that, in its presentation, Ready or Not establishes itself as pure wish fulfillment, and many of these harrowing situations we're placed in are not of innocent victims of no-knock raids, but are instead truly heinous people that need to be stopped. We won't spend too much time talking about the context of the game, as I would rather talk about the mechanical benefits of this narrative setup. But here I think we can immediately see our insecurities about SWAT teams are ameliorated with the introduction of very bad guys for us to dispense with, something shooting games have always done, going all the way back to Nazis and Wolfenstein. Ready or Not attempts to bring back a thinking person's shooter by slowing the pace down dramatically. Players complain of the slow, weighty feeling of the controls of the game when that is really the whole point. Slow is smooth. Smooth is fast. The contrast between this tension, this slow build-up to action, what we'll call the condensation, and then the rapid and hyper-violent resolution of the conflict, we'll call this the displacement, is Ready or Not's most important feature. More than its context, and more than its graphics and detail, it is this fundamental pull and release that is the most satisfying for players. There is nothing more enjoyable in Ready or Not than the first door breach, the fetishizing lining up of each member of the team, all in uniform, with all the tools, operating as one. A wound-up spring. The door breaches, there's yelling, civilians running into separate rooms, lasers glassing for the perps, and then, finally, when that painful pleasure is so overwhelming, someone may shoot just to release it, and all hell breaks loose. Afterward, teammates are laughing, Jesus Christs are thrown around, enemy weapons are looted off the floor, and there is, therefore, something satisfying in the obsessive-compulsive act of cleaning up, in the handcuffing of anyone who is left, of tidying up, of seeing the blood on the walls, and the after-effects of the chaos. The heartbeat slows, the tension releases, the scene is displaced, and so begins again. Here we can see that Ready or Not uses the same cycle of tension and release as that of the Battle Royale mode, but instead it is bottled, pressurized, and therefore exaggerated. The first bit of praise that I want to give to Ready or Not is that it knows exactly what it is doing to accentuate this cycle of violence. Sounds have a high dynamic range, from the pealing sounds of sirens and unsettling elevators and broken PA systems to the roar of high-caliber rifles and the harsh clack of their younger siblings, the submachine guns. Shotguns sound like artillery. The sounds of yelling, too, is harsh, unrelenting, nothing theatrical or performative about them, the feral sounds of desperate people regressing into schoolyard violence. And underneath that eerie ambient, sounds of the normal world replayed to us like a horror movie, white static of televisions, phones ringing, club music with no dancers, instead bodies stacked and deaths posed like marionettes. If you are at all interested in the spectacle surrounding shooting, the aesthetics of the experience are at their peak in the industry, and all point to this cycle of tension and release in a deliberate way. Of course, Ready or Not is not new. In between classic Doom arena shooters and the live, die, repeat Halo, Call of Duty revolution, plenty of military and law enforcement games attempted to capitalize on this condensation and displacement. The original Ghost Recon and Rainbow Six games come to mind. Level design was spaced in such a way that knowledgeable players would stage the scene with their own props, placing soldiers and materials at the ready, and would set off the violent event on their call. The effectiveness of this encounter and the counter-argument from the enemy would dictate the length. The dust would settle, and the player would choose new positions again, and the cycle would continue, but the benefit of longer missions was a bit like a game of chess, where earlier decisions would have subsequent effects on later choices. Ready or Not is a spiritual successor to the SWAT series. Besides the obvious graphical improvement, the fundamentals are all there. Tools to build up tension, like the mirror gun, and tools to release pressure, like flashbangs, are all present. Debate swirls throughout the community as to which is the better game, as each offers either fidelity or utility. The question to answer is this: does Ready or Not combine these moments of tension and release into a sequence that feels cohesive? Or is the experience schizophrenic and split? Probably the best game in the tactical environment to do this right now is not a shooter at all, but the strategy game Door Kickers 2. The game masterfully gamifies setup and payoff well, but it is also combinatory, where the choices made for what items to use and what tactics to use make their effects plain enough when a player finds themselves poorly positioned for an assault on a building some 45 minutes later, and the only entrance is guarded by a mounted weapon. Like chess, a player has to think several moves ahead. We might call the act of exhaustion across multiple encounters stress, and Ready or Not attempts to apply stress in the immediate sphere with visuals and sounds on the player, but also as a metagame experience in the single-player campaign mode with the SWAT characters themselves. I would say, compared to the clarity and precision of Door Kickers 2, Ready or Not is less than perfect at this. Sometimes players do not feel as though they have enough SWAT members to lock down a room, and sometimes they have to improvise, fully knowing that this could lead to their doom. When a player makes a bad choice in Door Kickers 2, it feels like a deliberate consequence. But for Ready or Not, the end result is a little more greedy, and feels like it arose out of happenstance. However, I think this works to the favor of both games. Ready or Not feels bizarrely replayable, perhaps for the hope of getting skills and luck aligned to do a run where no teammates die. Such is the case with Door Kickers 2, but with the strategy game, it is an attempt to replay a level to get the singular moment right rather than wrong. I think with Ready or Not, the issue is a more generalizable skill of the game's mechanics, running the missions over and over so that it becomes second nature. So the system of exhaustion, the system of stress, is meant to attack this intuition in Ready or Not. Can you approach new geography, a crack house, a laundry, a hospital, with the same peak performance as before? Regardless of the cycle of tension, and regardless of stress, the player who will enjoy Ready or Not the most is going to come from the kinds of obsessive-compulsive shooters who want to play it over and over, getting better and better. In a slight paradox, those strange moments of happenstance in Ready or Not, like for example an enemy combatant achieving perfect aim, or a flashbang not working, or C2 killing a perp in a room over rather than the immediate room, these may frustrate those players the most. I don't really know what to make of this paradox, but it is there, and should be present in a review of the game at 1.0. It has always been there, and so far, it hasn't gone away. Another hallmark of Ready or Not is its level design. It's all well and good to repeat condensation and displacement, but if the game is simply one corner-fed room after the next, the player does not get the satisfaction of being able to fuck up. Fucking up is paramount. Without it, we get no laughter, obscenity, and hyper-violent responses. Luckily, each level in the game is better than acceptable on two fronts. in offering a grounded, realistic scenario and offering novel geometric encounters. We have in the levels one doorway, or two. Sometimes, like in the case of the front entrance of the farm, we have over 5. For only 5 SWAT members, that's a harsh problem. We have long lanes and short closets. We have bird-like perches and stairs that descend multiple stories. Thanks to this sense of depth and height, Ready or Not capitalizes on its 3-dimensional space better than its 2-dimensional counterpart in Door Kickers 2, and it may even give SWAT 4 a run for its money. The purpose of these spaces is to justify certain arsenal choices, as well as to create texture or friction, giving the level an arc, or a story. As a spectacle shooting experience, it's tough to beat Ready or Not. It fully understands and uses the oscillation of our emotions to full effect. If you're into that sort of horror story action, and you especially have some willing friends who are able to lean into the experience, this is the shooter to beat. I worry sometimes that the aesthetic teeters a little too close to the breaking point, where the earnest desire to roleplay as the Punisher can come full circle and become a parody. But for the most part, the game grabs both sides of my head and holds my attention hard, and I love that. Thank you for watching.